Good afternoon. Welcome to this week's HopeCast. Today is Thursday, February 16th, 2023. I'm your host, David Lapp. Today I wanted to share about some of my early childhood days, some of my life growing up, and the time up to my life to the point where we were excommunicated from the Old Order Amish Church. Not sure how much I'm going to share yet, but we had a request that I share some of our history, some of where we came from. The scripture today is out of Ecclesiastes 12:1. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. When I look back and I think about my early childhood days, I had a life that I enjoyed. I can't say looking back that I had a terrible life that I was always looking at other people that I thought would have a better life. Growing up, we were in a family where, we did life. We had fun. We had a lot of times of just, learning to do life, learning to appreciate each other. Before I went to school, I would have chores in the morning that I would do, even when I was in my early grades of school. Grew up in New Holland, Pennsylvania. Went to a one-room schoolhouse. I think there was about 35 students in our school, grades 1 to 8 in a one-room schoolhouse, in New Holland, Pennsylvania area. And it was what we knew. We didn't know. We had no concept of going to a school where there's only first graders in a class or in a whole school or anything like that. I mean, we grew up where, as we kept progressing through the grades, if we were done with our lessons, the teacher would ask us if we want to help educate some of the younger children. That was always a fun part of my school years to challenge myself beyond the normal, I guess, if you would say, and get my lessons done, learn what I needed to learn, and then be available to help other people learn. And looking back now, I can see that was a learning experience for me, or a teaching experience for me to go beyond what was expected. And I remember leading other classes of younger grades. I remember even getting to the point where this one year I challenged myself to memorize every spelling word. We would usually have 20 words that we would spell every week. And for the whole year, I think it was about 6th or 7th grade, for a whole year, I memorized every word, and I had one wrong in spelling that whole year. So that was a highlight of that year, was to always challenge myself to memorize the words and make sure I knew how to spell them. And the teacher told me that if I want to take the test, and I'm confident that I know all the words, I could spell them, and I wouldn't have to wait till she gives the rest of the class the words. But she said if I ever miss a word and I started, then I'm just going to have that word wrong, which put responsibility on me that if I want to do this, I can step out and do that, but I need to know what I'm doing, when we get to that point. So that was an interesting part of my growing up years. We had fun at school. We had, like I said, we had first to 8th grade in one room schoolhouse. We would play together at recess. We just had a great time. And I know some people didn't like school, but I did. I always enjoyed school. I always enjoyed learning. One thing that our teacher taught us is she taught us how to learn more as a focus than on what to learn. It wasn't about just coming up with the right answers. It was understanding how we came up with that answer and why, how everything works. And I believe that was a big piece of why we're able to learn it as easy as we do now. Is, formerly I had an 8th grade education, but I've been on a learning journey ever since. Like, it's not that I stopped learning just because I was out of school. because I always enjoyed learning and I always enjoyed, challenging myself beyond the normal. When I was in 8th grade, we moved to Indiana, Williamsburg, Indiana area. Some of you know the area there. We were about 2 miles west of Williamsburg, Indiana, on W.E. Euler and Carlos Road, there at the intersection. Today there's a produce auction on the ground that we farmed. There's a greenhouse on the other corner and a house on the third corner, but I remember in all three of those fields were just open fields, and we would farm them. When I was 16, 17, about 2 or 3 years from when I was in my late teens, we were farming 400 acres with horses. It was my brother, 2 of my brothers, 2 of my sisters, and then we had 2 hired boys. We had it was a little over 400 acres. We had somewhere around 20 draft horses we would do our field work with. We had 2 herds of cows, so we were milking close to 100 cows in 2 different barns. And on the side, we would do custom hay wrapping just to fill up our spare time. So, and those were some of the best years of my life, and we absolutely loved it. One thing that really helped that Dad didn't know at the time, but we had 2-way radios, and we could pretty much cover the entire farm, from one end area to the next, and it really helped to have the communication that we needed to make sure that we get things done that needed to be done. So yeah, those were some exciting times. It was always the next challenge that we could overcome and just to get done what needed to be done. I remember days when I would leave before dawn in the morning to go wrap hay, and I would work till after midnight that night, and yeah, I loved it. It was a highlight of my farming career. Would have been the custom hay wrapping. And when I talk custom hay wrapping, I'm talking small square bales that usually weighed about 80 to 120 pounds, sometimes up to 150 pounds. And we would literally just throw them into a wrapper, 16 at a time, and then press them in and push them out into a tube. And I loved it. That was fun. When I started going with the youth, I know there's a whole Amish world out there that when people hear the word Amish, they think of a certain thing. Now, I know we probably didn't grow up normal. We didn't grow up the way every Amish community did. There's so many variations of Amish. Anywhere from on one side of the coin where if you have running water in your house, it's wrong. It just depends on where you draw the line. To the other side of the coin, where I know of some Amish in Lancaster County where the father is the legal driver for his 16-year-old son to drive a vehicle because he needed a construction driver. So you can look at Amish, and there's so many variations of different communities, how they look at things, how they live their life, that you can't just put everything in one box. I'm basically talking about my life experience, what I experienced growing up Amish. I loved it. It was a life that I have no regrets about. I mean, we lived life to the fullest. We lived life on the edge, if you will, and we just had a lot of fun with it. And with my youth, when I was going with the youth, there's this whole stigma out there about Rumspringa and what that means, and there again, it's so many variations of it. I mean, we have, that's what we called it when we were going with the youth, was Rumspringa. And basically what that meant for me was we would, Sunday afternoons, we would get together with a group of friends. I think we had around 50, 60 youth in our group, and we would play volleyball for a few hours. We would play some games, and then we would have supper, and then evening we would sing for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and we'd hang out a little bit after that, and then we'd go home. There was no wild parties. There was no, you hear about Rumspringa as a time of sowing wild oats. I didn't experience that. That was not something we did in our community, and I know there's communities that do that, and I don't recommend it. But that is not something that we did where we were at there in Indiana. it was just a fun time of getting to know other youth. And, through that experience is where I met my wife. She was a part of our youth group. We got married in 2003. At that point, I was managing the home farm. At that point, my older brother, had already been married. He took over the one farm. I took over the other farm. And, we were milking a herd of cows right over the time I was married. So my life probably didn't change as much as some people's lives do when they get married. Now, for my wife, she probably had a different experience than that, because she moved into the home farm where I grew up at, or where I guess I didn't grow up there, but I had spent 8 years living there. And we had our challenges early in marriage, and through that, we were on a journey with God. And growing up, our dad always taught us, to read the Bible. We would have Bible studies Sunday mornings, when we didn't have church. The Amish have church every other weekend. Like, we would not have church every weekend. On our off Sunday, we would do a Bible study with the family, and we would have a time of singing. And I always enjoyed singing as well. That was something that I learned, I don't know where, but I always enjoyed singing. And after we were married, some of the traditions we would keep. And about a year after we were married, we had our first child. And life was, we had plans of being on that farm till we retire. We had 30-year goals. We had life figured out, or that's what we thought. And about a year and a half after we were married, we were starting to get into some spiritual enlightenment. We were starting to find out about some of the challenges that some of the Amish deal with, and we went on a journey with God. And looking back, we made some mistakes along the way with how we portrayed, where we were at and what God was doing in our life. But through it all, I have no regrets of being where we're at today. Like, the Amish life, the Amish lifestyle, it wasn't a hardship. I don't look back with regret of what we went through, what we experienced with that. I usually tell people that I learned a lot growing up Amish, some of it willingly, because some of the stuff you learn in life, it was out of necessity, and you had to figure out a way to do things. So, as I think about life, I don't have any regrets on what we learned, where we're at with life, where God brought us to. We love what we do. We feel we have a extended family that's still with the old order Amish church. We can be together, for Christmas gatherings, events like that, and be a blessing to each other. I really feel like they have a desire to honor us and respect us, respect our journey, and we have a desire to be a blessing to them as well. Are they Christians? I believe they are. Would they profess to be born again Christians? Not too freely, but I feel like they're on a journey with God. I know they went through a lot with what my wife and I walked through the last 15, 17 years, but there's a lot of respect there for what we did. There's a lot of, agree to disagree kind of a life, or kind of a relationship. Relationship would probably be a better word. But looking back over the time when we were when God got a hold of us, and we were on a journey where we had to understand that God's word is the final word. God's word is our final foundation. And we got together with a group of us brothers every evening for, I don't know how long, half a year to a year probably, where we would just read the Bible, we would sing songs, we would have discussions, we were just on a journey to go deeper with God. And it got to the point where the religious structure that we were a part of could no longer endorse what we were doing. And I can easily understand where they were coming from because it was way out of the box. And I have, when we meet our former ministers, our former friends out there, I don't feel that there's any animosity towards each other. We can talk about life on a practical level, but once you get into spiritual discussions, then it's they start getting a little uncomfortable. But the longer we're on this journey with God, the more things go back to normal. So I feel like we have an opportunity to be a blessing to our friends in that community. We still go to that community at least once a year, twice a year, just to visit family, visit friends. There's a lot of openness there. There's a lot of relationships being rebuilt. I don't feel like there's a lot of hatred going on anymore. Early on, I think there was a lot of misunderstandings. There was a lot of stuff you just didn't talk about. But as we keep going with God, as we keep coming back to respecting their life, respecting their journey, but still understanding that God has us at a certain place where we need to walk, then healing can start to happen. So I'll probably pick up on this journey at a future, at another time, but I'm running out of time for today, so I'm going to wrap it up here. This was sort of what I had, the piece of it that I had cut out for today. So, if you have feedback, if you have questions, I'd love to hear your comments, hear your feedback. You can either comment on the Facebook video, on the YouTube video, or through our website. You go to blessingsofhope.com/about. At the bottom of the page, there should be a link where you can submit feedback. And we'd love to hear your feedback. Looking back over my life, I had fun. I had a great life. We had to get to the point where we believe that God is still good no matter what. And that's our foundation, where we believe that Jesus Christ is still on the throne. He still knows what he's doing, and we can still trust him with our future. So, the quote for today is from Aristotle. It says, "Good habits formed at youth make all the difference." And as I was thinking about this quote, that there's so much truth to that. If in your youth, if you learn to be responsible, you learn to be respectful, you learn to be a blessing to society, there's so much that can happen, that you just do automatically as you keep growing in your life. And forming good habits is a huge piece of being a blessing to society. You can go through life, you can blame everybody else for where you're at today, because if you really stop and think about it, your friends and family have had a lot to do with forming where you're at. But if you're going to look at them, if you're going to blame them for where you're at, and you're not taking personal responsibility for where you're at, you can have a miserable life. But if you get to the point where you believe that God had you on a journey, and you are where you're at, and that it's not where you want to be, but you're going to a pre-designed destination where God has you, and that you're ultimately responsible for your future, you'll have a different outlook in life. So I'm going to wrap it up with that. Thank you for joining me today on HopeCast. I'm David Lapp. I'm your host and also the CEO at Blessings of Hope. To learn more about Blessings of Hope and how we serve the community, you can go to blessingsofhope.com. God bless you, and remember, you can bring hope to the people that you meet every day.